Now you'll notice in the video when I was slicing the meat, I do it with the meat frozen. If you don't have a meat slicer, you can slice it by hand just fine. It's not a problem. I do it with this meat slicer because I like the way it slices real easily, but I do it frozen because if you look at this meat slicer, it's not very dirty. I mean, it needs to be cleaned, but this is the remnants after cutting all that meat up. Now, if I don't do it frozen, there's a lot of meat mess left over, and it's just hard to manage. The meat tries to ball up and pull itself into the blade, and it's just a lot easier doing it with it frozen. All right, this is where we make our seasoning, our marinade that we marinate the jerky in. As you can see, use crushed red pepper, Kikkoman soy sauce. Kikkoman is a must for the brand on the sauce because I've done it with many different sauces, but the Kikkoman just has a way better flavor in my opinion, but you can try whatever you want. We use a spicy brown mustard, some onion powder, garlic powder, Lee & Perrins Worcestershire sauce. Has to be that brand as well. I don't know why, but that brand just appeals to me the most. Some sugar, some brown sugar, and this here is smoked paprika. And we'll go through and put these in the mix, and once we get it all mixed up, then we'll take the meat, bring the meat over, and marinate it overnight. Now what I do when I'm mixing the stuff together, what I do is I start with my sugars first. And that is because your mixing cup, once you get liquids in there and then you try and put your sugar in later, it sticks to the cup and it's kind of a hassle. So I start with that first, and then I'll put in the other ingredients as I go. More of the seasoning, get all that stuff in there, and then I put the liquids in last before I mix it all up. First things first, I got a half a cup of brown sugar going in. Next, we have a quarter of a cup of granulated sugar. Okay, so what I have now is I've added all my seasonings. What I do is I do 1 tablespoon of smoked paprika, a tablespoon of garlic powder, and a tablespoon of onion powder. Then I do 1 nice little healthy squirt of the brown mustard, spicy brown mustard, because I like the little spice, and 1/4 cup of the red pepper flakes. Now, that's pretty spicy. I mean, you can cut it back or add more if you want, if you like it really spicy. I have another ingredient that I put in to make it even extra spicy with a little bit more flavor, but that's my secret. I'm not going to tell anybody what that one is, but you can add pretty much anything you want. You could put cayenne, you could put jalapeno seed, you could do anything you want to with it. That's the beauty of it. This is just my basic setup of what I start with when I make jerky, and then I'll add different things. Honey's a good one. You could put honey in, you could put anything you want basically in here and get whatever flavor you want. But this is the basics that I do every time I make it, so I know I have it the same every time. Now next I'm going to add the liquids, and it's going to be the Worcestershire sauce and the soy sauce. Okay, all the liquids are added. What I did is I do 1.5 cups of the Kikkoman soy sauce, and I do 1/4 cup of the Worcestershire sauce. The Worcestershire sauce is really strong, and I found that if I do any more than that, it kind of overpowers it. But this is a pretty good mix for me. And then on top of that, I add 1.5 cups of water to thin things down and get the volume up so I can go ahead and marinate it. And then what I do now is I take the sliced up meat that I sliced earlier and I put it in, and I'll put it in the fridge with saran wrap on it, and I'll leave it for 24 hours. You can go a little less or a little more, whatever you like to do, but usually that gets it all the way through the meat. And I like the red pepper flakes in the marinade because if you sprinkle it on the meat as you smoke it and dehydrate it, it tends to all just fall off. This way the flavor gets into the meat and it bonds to the meat. So when you do dehydrate it and smoke the meat, the pepper flakes stay on the meat. Okay, there we have it. All the meat in the bowl with the marinade. And what I do is I put the marinade in the bowl first, and I add the meat like 1 piece at a time. That way I can make sure that it gets completely covered each piece. When you just throw it in a big old blob, a lot of times the pieces of meat in the middle, they might not get marinade to them. So I do it that way, and then once it's in there, actually as I'm doing it too, I mix it up really good with the meat. That way you get those red pepper flakes and the red pepper seeds on the meat on the inside, because otherwise it all just floats to the top. What I do is after it marinates overnight, I go ahead and I put it on my smoker and get that good smoke flavor to it. And also what that does is brings it up above 165 for at least, I believe the rule is 15 minutes or something like that, but I usually smoke mine at about 200 for an hour and a half. That way I know it's been brought up to temperature and everything's good. Then I'll take it off of there and I'll put it in the dehydrator and dehydrate it the rest of the way. But if you don't have a smoker, you can also use a dash or a tablespoon of liquid smoke to get that flavor and put that in there before you put it on the dehydrator. I prefer the taste of alderwood, so I use alderwood when I smoke it. But you can get all different flavors of liquid smoke if you would rather go that route. Now it's all wrapped, ready to go in the fridge. What I do is I put this wrap on there and I push it down into the liquid. That way I know there's no air in there. And I put it in the fridge overnight. Okay, fresh off the smoker. Smoked it for about an hour and a half at between 150 and 180 degrees. There's the rest of the meat right there. Getting ready. I'm stacking it on these grates for the dehydrator, and then we're going to dehydrate it at 145 degrees for 4 hours. It should be done and ready to eat. Okay, we got the dehydrator all loaded up with the jerky. I set mine up out in my garage because I set it at 4 hours. Let's see if we get a better angle. At 145 degrees. I don't know if you can read that or not. But the reason being, this thing says to set it at 165 or 160. And when you try and do it in this one, it actually burns it up. Gets too hot and it turns the meat all black. So I've played with it over the time that I've been using this thing, and I've got it to where 145 is pretty perfect for this dehydrator. Other ones may be a little bit different, but for 4 hours at 145, it turns out nice and pliable. It's not over dry, it's not burnt up, and it's just really good flavor. But you'll see here in 4 hours what we end up with. And there we go, she's dehydrating. The reason I do it in the garage is because if you do this in the house, the smell that comes out of this is so good, but after 4 hours of smelling your house up with it, it gets pretty strong, and after smelling it for so long, it's like you don't really want to eat it because you've been smelling it all day, but it'll turn out good. Okay, so this is it. I want an extra half hour on this. What you do is you take this jerky and fold it over. See how it breaks, but it's still stringy? That means it's done. It's not overdone, it's not underdone, it's still hot. Take it off and let it cool until it's completely cold. It tastes a lot better. Awesome jerky right here. Don't leave it on the counter, it ain't gonna last long.